Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you this morning?
Very well. I got back the other night on Monday from Vienna. I was just teaching an advanced movement principles educator training there, and now I'm home.
Nice. For what, a week or two?
Well, I'm home till I come to see you.
I was going to say you're
together.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm coming to see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. A couple of weeks. You'll be here in DC. That should be a lot of fun. Do a little bit of recording. And so everybody stay tuned. We're going to be doing a lot more on social media. We're going to be having some good fun. So we take these opportunities to get together and, shoot some videos and have a little bit of fun. So be on the lookout for that. Very cool. I'm glad that the trip was uneventful. I was watching it through social media and you guys post a lot of food pics. I got to tell you.
That's Al, man. That is all Al. Al is all about the food pics.
I was going to say, it always makes everybody jealous.
Well, there you go. We get a lot of hits on some of those. So a couple of things too for everybody. So we're going to be filming some things and just some short, cute things. But we're also going to be filming some video courses and working on getting those kind of out and about. Also, we were just on Level Up Movement with Don't Risk Your Discs, which will be available as a recording for those of you who want to check that out. You'll get to see us actually like live and on equipment moving if you want to check that out. And those are
that was very cool
to hang out with us. We had a really good time. It was really nice. We're going to do another one soon.
Yeah, we had a great time doing that. And I mean, so much so, we probably could have done another hour easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked a lot about low back. We talked that was mainly what we were talking about, lumbar spine, disc issues. And we went through a lot of exercises, trying to take some of the most basic exercises that almost everybody does, but how to regress them, how to progress them, throw in some variables, training in 3 dimensions, all of that sort of thing. So if you are interested, it's a great thing. I think it's levelupmovement.com.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
You know what? I'm going to put the link in our bio for this week.
Perfect.
So if you want to check that out, you can. The recording's there. And we had a whole lot of fun and a lot of exercises. And again, it's great that you can actually see us not just sitting here, but actually doing things and going through all the exercises. So, and we're going to be recording in 2 weeks and doing some of that stuff. So be on the lookout. We're going to be having a lot of things ready for you in the near future.
Absolutely. We're starting to work on our future now. It's really exciting. Brian and I started with the podcast and that's been going really well. And we're just kind of continuing to build that. But we also love to teach live, and we're looking at some different live venues. We're going to be teaching in Charleston towards the end of the year. And we're going to look at some other venues as we go forward into 2024 and 2025. So look forward to seeing some of you guys on the road. Yeah,
exactly.
Let us know. We'll come to you.
Yes, exactly. So if you have a studio, I'd love to have us come and teach. We'd love to come and do our thing live and in person.
We really do try to mix Pilates, personal training, functional training, bring all those pieces together. So, if you've got a studio that's more personal training, we focus that way. If you've got a Pilates studio, we focus that way. But Brian, I always have this goal of creating better movement outcomes, regardless of what your tools are, what your background is, what your particular modalities are. We just love to mix it up and bring your clients and you the best results possible.
Absolutely. Well, this week we have a topic that, I took a look at our schedule and I was like, ooh, we better post this pretty soon because, springtime is here. And I don't know about, you are on the West Coast.
Spring's here.
Spring is not only there, it's been there for a few weeks now. So y'all are out doing things and whatnot. But in the Northeast today, here is rainy. It's cold. It's still hit and miss. We'll have 2 or 3 days of nice sun and people get out, and then we'll have, another week of not the greatest weather. So what we thought is spring training,
Yep.
getting back into your routine after long winter's hibernation, because a lot of our listeners are in areas where you're going to be hibernating. You're only going to have the gym. You're not going to be able to do things outside. So let's talk about that. How do we get back into that? How do we sort of focus our training and training methodology on getting back to that so we can help prevent injuries and hopefully, up our game?
Right. So some of this begins with, what have you been doing? Right. Again, if you're
Oh, yeah.
if you're somewhere where you can't be outside, I'm not, right. I'm in California. We can pretty much, in Northern California, we can be outside most of the time unless it's actively raining. But if you're not, if you're in Minnesota, or you're in, South Dakota, or you're in Washington, D.C., or New England somewhere, that's not so likely, right? You've spent a lot of days doing something inside. So maybe it's indoor spin classes, maybe it's going to the gym, maybe it's, maybe you do indoor swimming. But a lot of times around this period, when the weather starts to warm up, when the trees start to sprout, you start to think, I want to get back outside and do my running, or
Mhm.
do my cycling, or do my my baseball, or my other sports. So that's a time when your body's used to one kind of activity, and doesn't always like to make a quick transition to something else. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. What's interesting is in my practice, we see a lot of people getting injured around this
Yeah,
time of year
those transitions
because
are tough.
the transition is tough. Even if they've been training, I mean, I don't know how it is there, but we get a lot of people starting in October or something saying, okay, ski season's coming. No more golf. Now it's time for ski season. So we start ramping up for ski season. And ski season is about over. My last client just got back from Utah. So it's like, okay, all of my clients are, finished with their skiing. So now it's ramping them up for golf, tennis, pickleball, all of those type of activities if they're going to do that. And for some people, let's just say when it gets cold, when their body gets a little colder, they don't want to move. So they don't go to the gym as often. They don't go outside as often. And the other thing to think about is something that I try not to do around my house. However, my wife is very big on it and I help her out whenever I can, is gardening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big one that we got to put into this context as well, because the bending over, twisting, turning, yanking the weeds, all of that sort of thing can lend itself as well to, I mean, I was just talking to a client who said, yeah, I was out there in the, prepping the garden and I was out there for 6 hours. I was like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, no wonder you're so sore today. Holy
Yes,
moly.
exactly. Exactly. And I haven't done that. I haven't done any of those activities. I haven't been down on my knees. I haven't been on the floor. I haven't been pulling things and pushing things from awkward positions, probably for
Yep.
6 months. And I
Yep.
certainly haven't been doing it for 6 hours.
Yes. And that's the big deal, is a lot of this comes down to endurance, or what I call tissue tolerance. Your
Yep.
tissues get used to doing what you do regularly. So
Yep.
if all you do is Pilates, it gets used to that type of stress. If all you do is yoga, it gets used to that stress, or weight training, or cardiovascular. I have some clients who sort of just want to do cardio all winter long for some reason, and they don't
Hmm.
do as much weight training, and that's fine. That's
Right.
their goal. But you have to remember, that stress isn't going to translate very well to things like gardening, to things like golf, or out cycling, or even running outside. If you're running on a treadmill and you go to run outside, let me tell you, gang, those are different animals.
It's a different deal. And your body
Yeah.
isn't necessarily prepared for it, right?
Yep.
So some of it is, I know very often in the winter too, here too, people do something simple and consistent in a way, right? Again, maybe it's
Mhm.
spin class, maybe it's Pilates, maybe it's cardio, or maybe it's a weight routine that they've been doing for a while that they just continue to maintain. But that isn't necessarily multiplanar. It isn't reactive. None of those things really take you into more the real world, because even if you're running on a treadmill, that surface is consistent. You can choose your speed. You don't have bumps and lumps and slopes, right, of
Yep.
the street or the track or whatever else you're running with, and your body isn't necessarily used to that level of unpredictability.
And also, what most people forget about, unless you have a treadmill like we've got here, where there is no motor, where you are the motor pushing your way through. When you're on a treadmill, you're keeping up with the machine. So your anterior muscles are working a lot more. Your hip flexors are working a lot more because you're trying to keep up with the machine. Whereas when you're outside, you're propelling your own body through space. So it
Mm.
changes the activity level. You're going to work your hamstrings, your glutes, your low back a whole lot more. I remember I had a client after a hip replacement who started walking on the treadmill, and he said, "Oh, I'm walking 3 miles a day." And I said, "Fantastic." I said, "But you're on a treadmill." I said, and he said, "It's the same thing." And he's a physician. And he said, "It's the exact same thing." And we happened to have a track. So I said, "Okay, why don't you walk around the track instead? Give me your warm up there. Let's do a mile." And when you're finished with that, he made it a half mile and was so exhausted. His body was just beat because it was a
Yeah.
different animal. It was a completely different animal, and it was a track, so he didn't have the variability of outside. So, and I
Right, right,
told him,
right, right, right. It's not like
I said,
it's,
"Now let's
yeah.
add in outside, and you've got all the variability and sidewalks." I don't know what it's like out in Sacramento, but with trees and everything,
Yeah,
all of
roots
those.
and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to watch where you're walking, watch where you're running, and you're going to have a lot more variability on top of just going outside and propelling your own body through space. So really taking a look at what you've currently been doing is a good thing. And then I say, take a look at what activity you want to do
Hmm.
and then what's involved in that. Make it goal oriented. So if it is gardening, okay, a lot of bending, a lot of twisting, a lot of turning, a lot of, motions like that, pulling, whether it's shoveling, all of that. So there's motions where you can sort of say, okay, let's focus on this. Whereas if it's pickleball, okay, now there's more lateral movement. Now there's going to be some rotation. There's things that are very goal oriented to the activity.
And that's something that you want to think about when planning your transition into spring workouts,
Yeah.
right? So you're thinking about what you were talked about earlier of pickleball players or golfers. Well, if they haven't been playing golf, and generally golf is generally a warmer weather activity,
Yep.
right? For most of us, anyway. If somebody is not been golfing for 3 or 4 or 5 months, and suddenly they're like, "Hey, I'm going to go for a weekend down to Phoenix or down to Florida or whatever," um, you got to work on some rotation, right? You've got to get that
Mhm.
body prepared for rotation, because that particularly is something where people who haven't been really moving in that plane for a period of time will suddenly go do 18 holes and wonder why their back hurts, right?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And that's something that people forget is that when you're turning, you want to make sure that you're getting them to turn through their shoulders, turn through their thoracic so that they're not just wrenching their back every time they swing. And what you're going to find is they're fine through 9 holes, but it's usually hole 11 or 12 that all of a sudden their body's just like, okay, I'm done. But what do? If it's anything like my skiers,
Carry on.
they're going to not only carry on, but they're saying, I just flew down to Florida. I just flew down to Arizona. I'm here
I
for 3 days. I'm going to play 3 days of golf and we're going to do 36 holes and da, da, da.
I'm getting my money's worth. I'm on vacation,
Exactly.
darn it. Right.
You know what? My skiers, one of them just came back
Yes.
and his knee was killing him. And I said, okay, first of all, you're not 25 anymore. Secondly, you were skiing on warmer because it
Mm.
started to get warmer, but you did 4 days straight, bright and early in the morning, all the way till sundown. I said, your body's not ready for that. Your body's not ready for that. No wonder your knee's killing you. And he should have taken a day off in between.
Or even an afternoon off.
Exactly.
Oftentimes, so one of the things that I certainly have discovered, given the age that I am, is that you just don't recover as quickly. We talked a little
Yeah.
bit about recovery in a previous episode. The story I sometimes tell is I was teaching at a university down here briefly, a dance kinesiology class. Everybody in
Mhm.
the class was pretty much 26 and younger, like 26 to 18 was pretty much the age range. And we were talking about recovery and talking about when you have an injury, how much time you should take off and that kind of thing. And there's a 26-year-old in class. She was the oldest woman in class aside from me. And she said, well, when you get to be my age, it takes like 2 days to recover. And I just started laughing because I said, when you get to my age, at that point, I was 40 something. It's like, it's going to take you 2 weeks to recover, but right.
Exactly.
So, and it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing it. But again, it's sometimes like when you start to feel that little creak in your back or your knees or your hips or whatever, because you've been gardening for half a day, stop if you can, right? Go take care of yourself, stretch, ice, roll it out, whatever works for you to kind of get things going, have a good night's sleep, and then hit it again. Because that's really, the body just often needs more recovery time than you're giving it.
And I'm going to say this, and it's not that I'm not saying that. I'm sure all of our listeners are incredibly intelligent. However, intelligence and common sense don't always apply to one another. There's not always a lot of crossover in that Venn diagram. Use common sense and teach this to your clients, that if they're starting to feel it, take a break.
Take a break. And sometimes, there was a study I read, or something that I read, where there was an army that was marching, I think, like either to or from Russia. This is a long time ago. Who knows if this is an apocryphal story, but I thought it said what we need to say. And basically, right, they've got this entire army, and they're marching, they're marching, they're marching, they're marching. And what they discovered was that if they gave them even a 5-minute rest every hour, that they could go twice as long almost as those who they made do it continually.
Wow.
I'll have to look it up, because I'm maybe being a little dramatic with my statistics there, but it was interesting because they really just said, okay, we're going to take 1 5-minute break every hour of marching. And people just stopped. They didn't do anything fancy during those 5 minutes, but they waited and they rested. And then they started again, and then they rested, and then they started again. And even that small amount of rest in the middle of that kind of ongoing endurance activity made all the difference in terms of them being able to go on for longer with less injuries.
That's something really worth noting for our clients, and to let them know that, because I suffer from that. If I'm washing the cars, if I'm working outside, it's like I have in my head, I don't know if you're anything like this, but I'm an underestimator. So when I look at a job, I'm like, oh, that's an hour, without realizing it's probably 3 hours. So a good portion of the way in, I'm halfway through, and I look and it's been 2 hours already. My brain is just like, don't stop, just keep going.
Keep going.
Finish it. Get it done, because I didn't allow myself enough time in my head, because I thought, oh, easy job, half hour. And I have to remind myself, if it's not something like fixing the car where you're going to have to drive somewhere later, if it's something outside, if it's something in the garden, if it's something, it's like, you don't necessarily have to finish it today. Take a break. You can come back to it, and when we do have clients who go on these trips, that are there to, and we spoke about this during the tendonitis thing, where they're there to do that specific thing, but their body hasn't done it for 3 months, 4 months, whatever it's been. There's going to be some repercussion. And especially if you're doing 2 days of 36 holes and 2 days of 18 holes, no wonder you're going to come home and your back is a wreck, or your hip or your knee or something. The weakest link is always going to be the thing that talks to you. And how many times have we had that walk through the door that we can immediately tell, oh, yeah, okay, your knee's bothering you. What'd you do? Oh, you just got back from, oh, okay. How many holes did you play? Oh, wow, yeah. Or I went to a tennis clinic, which is big during spring breaks.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're right in spring break here in DC. And that's when, we see people, oh, I'm going to go away and I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to do that with the family. Fantastic. Listen to your body. I'm not telling you don't move, because I want you to move, but listen to your body. And if it's something that's like, yeah, my back's not too happy with this, I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break and then continue on. So use that common sense.
And honestly, use your phone. Like, set your phone for a certain period of time. Because I'm thinking, you're talking about like doing car stuff or cleaning the cars. I think about gardening. If you're a weeder, like if you just go out and do your weeding, that can be a very kind of OCD activity, to be honest, right? Like, oh, but there's just one more. Oh, but there's always just one more. And so you can end up bent over pulling things for an extended period of time. So, oftentimes I literally will have my phone in my pocket and I'll set it for 40 minutes or whatever I'm setting it for.
Nice.
And it'll go off. I'll be like, oh man, I want to keep going. But I stand up, I go into extension. I'll just take a hold of my low back and I'll stretch a little bit, loosen up my shoulders, just move in the opposite direction of where I've been for all that time. And then I go back to it. Same thing if you're doing running, if you're doing cycling, if you're doing swimming, if you're doing anything repetitive like that.
Yes.
Take a moment, right? Set your timer. If you're on a bike or you've got wearable tech, set it and just say, okay, I'm going to run for 10 and I'm going to walk for 2, or I'm going to run for 10 and I'm going to walk for 5, or I'm going to bicycle for 20 minutes. And then I'm going to just like get off my bike, stretch a bit, wiggle a little bit, get back on my bike. Right. All just those little tiny breaks make a huge difference in terms of allowing you to get back into the activity without causing so much trouble that you're set back, right, and can't do anything for a while.
I love what you just said, and I'm going to reiterate it. Do the opposite of what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Move in the opposite way. For my golfers, I have them swing the opposite way every 3 holes.
Nice.
And I say, it doesn't have to be a pretty swing. It could look like a baseball swing. I don't care. Just if you're right-handed and you've been going one direction the whole time, guess what? Do it the other way 3 times and just allow yourself to unwind. If you're, tennis player, think about doing a little bit more. If you're a backhand sort of person, okay, let's stretch out your anterior, whatever it is. And if you're in the garden, definitely do some extension, stand up, go into extension, reach out, allow your body to move, especially in that position to rotate, because chances are, if you're right-handed, you're going to be favoring one side. I mean, anybody who's watched someone rake, they rake almost one direction 90% of the time and the other way 10%. So do the opposite. Allow your body to unwind and to move in a different way, a different path of motion.
So with running, right, like a little stretch moment, a little stretch break for the calves, for the quads, even for the hamstrings, right? For if you're a cyclist, very few cyclists are sitting upright, right? You're over your handlebars. You're generally either round backed or at least hips are flexed. Stand up, stretch your hips out, open up your chest because you're typically closed like that, right? Your neck is doing something funny. Look down with your head. Just reverse whatever you're doing. Again, 2 minutes, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe not even that long, but just stop, let the body reorient, and then get back on what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. I wanted to cover some common injuries that we're going to see in our practice as well. Because what we see is this: the person's been hibernating for a period of time, and while they may have been active in one way, shape, or form, they haven't been active in their activity, and they go back to it. The first beautiful day outside, they go and want to play basketball. They want to go play softball or baseball, or they want to play pickleball or tennis, golf, whatever it is. They want to get outside or get on the bike. And what we find is that whatever is the weakest link is going to have an issue. I was literally just talking to my last client when I mentioned our topic today, and she laughed and she said, you know what? Remember when pedometers first came out, that 10,000 steps? Well, we had a little thing going at the office, and I had to win. I had to win. So she tripled the amount that she was walking before. She led herself to stress fractures in her foot.
Ooh.
Her body wasn't ready to do that much work at all of a sudden. It's like 0 to 60, boom. And that was the big difference for her. She realizes she really needs to take it gradually. And again, we do need to do this as we get older. So that's one thing we see, especially with our tennis players, because suddenly they're moving laterally. They're doing that start and stop motion. They're going forward and back, side to side, and their feet are hitting the ground hard in order for them to stop, because not a whole lot of people are playing on grass. They're usually playing on a hard court.
Yep.
And pickleball is the same way. You may not be covering as much of the court, but you're still doing that side to side. So we are seeing things like stress fractures in our feet, in the ankle, sometimes even going up into the tibia fibula area. And those, they're a little more than a nuisance. They will be prolonged, and they are painful.
They can put you out. Shin splints. Another one I see again with runners, especially runners who are like, I'm in Sacramento where it's flat as a pancake. So our runners typically don't do hills much because there are no hills to do. And then, they may say, hey, I was in the Bay Area training, or I was somewhere, in the mountains training. And suddenly they're doing hills and they're doing a lot more of that dorsiflexion. And man, their shins are killing them. So yes, exactly. So what are those issues? Knees, hips, certainly knees. If they're a weak link, the back can come back and
Yep.
haunt you. If those are weak spots for you. And again, moderation, because any of those
Yes.
things, I mean, especially stress fractures, to your point, those can really take you out for a while. Those can be
Yep.
really just require some time out of the activity to heal. Other things can be shorter lived, maybe, depending, but you
Let's
just want to
hope.
be careful with that, because you don't want to, ideally we don't want to start and stop, right? We don't want to go 100% and then have to stop for 2 weeks and then go 100%, have to stop for 2 weeks. That's not really good for us physically, and it's not really good for our fitness overall, right? Consistency at a lower level is better.
Yep. We also see a lot of tendonitis.
Yes.
We see a lot of shoulder for our tennis players because all of a sudden we don't live in this position with our arms up over our heads.
Mm-mm.
But when you do that overhead serve and you're practicing with someone, you may do it 20, 30, 40 times to get back into the groove. You're asking your shoulder to do a movement that you weren't doing on a regular basis. So now you've really taken that shoulder joint, the subacromial space basically, and shortened it, and squeezed all of those tissues that go through that area over and over and over again. And that repetitive use can cause an issue, especially when you start playing 2 or 3 times a week, which I've got some type A personality people here in DC. They go 0 to 60, and that's what we see. So we see a lot of shoulders, you know. We've seen even tendon ruptures, someone who
Yep.
hasn't, played basketball and they go up for a jump shot. I remember one client, an older woman, ruptured her tendon playing tennis. She hadn't played in a year at least, went down to Jamaica in the middle of winter and decided to play tennis. Well, it was something completely new to her, and she had a tendon rupture running for a ball. So these are all things that we can head some of these off at the pass if we know that that's an activity that they're going to be doing. It's okay. Let's break down the activity. What is necessary to strengthen and build up that tolerance? And is it something that we can sort of say, okay, we're going to start building you up slowly? If it is tennis, for instance, that's stop and go, start and stop motion, but also lateral movement and more of an anaerobic thing where they might be doing more of a, I'm not going to say sprinting, but even a jog for 30 seconds, then a walk for a minute, something of an interval. So they get that heart rate going and their body's moving at a more rapid pace, and then they calm back down. And again, it's all based on their goals. Whatever their goal is, we want to focus on that and sort of break down the things that we might see in that sport or that activity and build them up for that.
So this gets to the, like, I feel like we've transitioned now. We were talking really at first, or it seemed like talking really just for general advice for
Yep.
clients who do a variety of different things, right? And who maybe haven't moved much. This is really looking at how the practitioner, the movement practitioner, can facilitate their client moving forward, getting trained, getting prepared for what spring will bring them.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think too, if I'm really looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, so they're going to be going again to tennis camp during Easter break, very common, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that, or basketball camp or whatever. But that's just like a time of really intense physical activity, generally after a period of inactivity. As a trainer, I want to think about that. I want to know about that 6 weeks ahead. Is what I
Mm-hmm.
always think of. The minimum is 6 weeks ahead. Like in 6 weeks, I can probably get you at least a little better able to tolerate a new activity or a different activity or a radical increase in activity than I can if I'm only given, a day or two or a week or two.
Yeah, absolutely. The longer we have, the better. And I do
Mm-hmm.
tell my clients that when you do plan your vacations and these things, let me know in advance because we
Yeah.
can prepare. We
Yeah.
can prepare. But at the same time, it's not just preparing our clients, but also preparing ourselves. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of us, they say the most injured people in the country are usually the professional athlete, personal trainers, and the very old. And when I say
Uh-huh.
personal trainers, fitness
Fitness
enthusiasts,
professionals.
fitness
Yes.
professionals, because we take our bodies to that absolute limit. We work out
Yeah.
harder and more often than the average Joe.
Yeah.
When you talk about someone who's doing, I do a split. I work out in the morning and in the afternoon, and then I do cardio on top of that. Are you out of your mind? But you know what? Guilty. I used to do that when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And my body was always injured
Mm-hmm.
because I was pushing myself way too hard and not giving myself enough recovery.
Yep.
So the fitness professional, we do have that tendency to suddenly be like, yes, I can go outside. I'm going to start running. Let's do a 10K. Let's do a half marathon. And let's do it next weekend.
There's also, don't take this the wrong way, but there's the memory of what you used to be able to do.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was, and again, that's whether it was before the winter, right? Because, a lot of times if we're really intent about an activity, by the time we get to, let's say, the end of September or middle of October, we've been doing that activity for 6 months, whether it's swimming or, but we've gotten pretty good at it, right? Potentially. And
Yep.
so our memory is like, oh, I am still as good as I was in September, right? At the peak time after I'd been training for 6 months pretty consistently and really kept it up. And so there's also there's that assumption in our bodies that we don't change. And I don't know about you, but everybody I know has that assumption that actually I'm still 20 and I can still do the splits. Okay, I can't, but part of me still thinks that. So there's just that, that idea of like just realizing, no, that's not how it works as we age anyway. Like, okay, just be aware of that. You just gotta take care of yourself. You got to give yourself some time, get acclimated to the new activity or the recurrence of the activity and build yourself up.
Yeah. I am reminded of almost every single guy that comes to me when they haven't worked out in 10 years or 20
Mm-hmm.
years or 30
Mm-hmm.
years, but they
Mm-hmm.
remember what they did in college.
Yep.
And they remember they bench pressed 225 pounds and they immediately think, oh, I'm going to warm up with, 135, just one plate on the bar. And I'm thinking, really? You haven't lifted weights in 20 years.
Yeah.
And you're going to go back to what your warm up weight was right out of the gate. I don't think so.
Absolutely.
But their brain is telling them, or their brain is telling them, I remember how to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, but
because your brain does, but your body does not. Right?
I was just
Your
going to
brain
say,
is like, I got this. Your body's like,
exactly. I remind every single one I say, you are a different person you were then.
Yes.
You are not in the same shape, but cellularly, all those cells are different.
Right. You've
You
turned
are
over.
not.
Your cells
Yes.
have turned over. You're not the same person you were literally from the cellular level on up.
Exactly. So, and when they go, oh, really? I say, okay, yeah, we need to start this way back at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is a time when we do see an influx, especially about around first of the year as well. But we will see an influx even now with the whole bikini body sort of. I'm just using that as a stereotype,
ready
but
for the beach.
I need to get in shape for,
Yeah.
Summer.
Yeah.
We're going to do some beach. We're going to go here. We're going to go there. And I want to be in shape. So people start coming back who may not have been working out for a few years. And they're like, oh yeah, you remember me? Yeah, we did this. I say, okay, yeah, no, you're a new person to me now. If it's been more than a couple years, you are a brand new person. 100%. I have to do a brand new assessment.
Yep.
I have to figure out where you are.
Start from where you are.
Yeah, because you're not the same person, even though you feel like you probably are. You're definitely not. So that's something for us to keep in mind that, yeah, definitely set those realistic expectations as well.
I think about one of my siblings who you know well, who basically hadn't biked all winter. He was a serious cyclist during the summer, but hadn't really biked much all winter, a little bit of indoor cycling, but not a lot. And then basically decided to do a double century. And oddly enough, ended up with a bit of patellar tendonitis because
you think?
Right, you think? Exactly. Because he was on the bike for 6 hours for 2 days in a row, and he'd been on the bike probably a total of 12 hours in the previous 6 months. So, these are just, and again, he's like, I know how to cycle. I can do this. I've done this before. I can do it now.
Yep.
Maybe, but most likely you probably need to prepare for that with a little more build up.
Yes, absolutely.
A client or a teacher or a trainer, whatever you're doing. And it's so hard, isn't it, Brian? Like just that moderation is not, if you're an athlete, if you're a physical person, it is just not always in your nature to take it easy.
It is really difficult. I was someone who always lifted a lot of weight in the gym. Not a lot, but I was a decent size guy in the gym, among the top 20% probably for lifting. I'm now 53. I'm not 23 anymore. So you know what? I have to remind myself to moderate when I'm looking at weights and I'm going to do an exercise or teach my son an exercise that I may not have done in the last couple of years, but I'm like, oh, I like that exercise. That used to feel really good. And I have to remind myself, no, don't just grab your old weight. Even though I've been doing other things.
Yes.
We started deadlifting again.
Yeah.
And I hadn't done it in a long time, but I wanted to teach him how to do it properly because he's 16. So what did I do? Just the bar. And then the smallest 10 pounds on each side, because we can get those large weights. So we can really focus on form. Now, could I hoist a lot more weight? Absolutely. But I wanted to remind my body, and I had to keep reminding myself because I wanted to just pile on the weight. It's like, no. And slowly we've worked up to 105 pounds. And again, he's 16. He's never done deadlifts before. So it's like, okay, you're over 100 pounds. Great. And I just lift whatever his weight is, and it's feeling easy. But I remind myself, I've had back issues. I've had knee issues. I'm going to take it easy. I'm not just going to jump back in, because every time I do jump back in at my former weight and put on 135 and think, oh, this is easy, put back on 225. Can I do it? Yes. My body will remember. Am I much more prone to injury? Yes. Chances of me injuring myself? High. So you know what? Start off easy, work my way back up. And I said, I'm not in a rush. If it takes me a year and a half to get back up to 135 pounds, I don't care. I don't care, because I'm not in a rush anymore. I don't need to be the strongest guy in the gym. I'm 53. And I think having those realistic expectations of what is possible for someone getting back into this is also something to take into account, whether it be how long of a game you're playing. I have a lot of my older clients who, are now playing doubles instead of singles for tennis.
Right. Yep.
Because it's easier on their joints.
9 holes instead of 18 for golf.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And playing a shorter course.
Yeah.
So instead of playing the course that they used to, which was a lot longer, shorten it up, or play the executive 9, which is, and I say, practice your short game skills.
Right.
There's nothing to prove, especially as we get a little bit older. We all want to remember our glory days and relive those. And, you might have a hole or two where you feel that way, but in general, have those realistic expectations. And whether it be for us ourselves or for our clients, it's always good to remind them of that and to really set those realistic expectations.
Gently. Some people take to that well, in my experience, and some people really don't.
Yes.
And that's just part of being a trainer, and part of working with people is people's expectations about who they are, and their self-awareness can be good or can be less good, right? Sometimes clients really have that ability to do that, and some don't. And sometimes they'll just keep paying the price for not quite realizing that they're not really up for what they think they're up for. And, then they have to learn the hard way, right? They get injured and finally have to stop long enough to get better, and then figure out what they have to do differently. So
I'm going to throw something in here that I'm going through with one of my clients right now. The guy who just came back from skiing. Sometimes if we see someone often, whether it's once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it is, and I've been seeing some of my clients for years and years, sometimes it's good to remind them of the basics again.
Yeah.
Because we assume that they know it, because, man, they should know it. I've been working with them for how many years? But at the same time, this guy came back from skiing and his knee was not happy. And I said, okay, we're going back to square one. And he was not happy. I said, when's the last time you rolled out your IT band? Because I was looking at it, I said, oh man, you got some lateral tracking issues going on here. So when's the last time? Oh, well, I hate that stuff. All right. You may hate it, but let's get back to the basics. So reminding them of what's important is just as important as setting up realistic expectations or creating the best game plan for them, because they may have forgotten some things that we think we're taking for granted, like rolling, like stretching afterwards.
Exactly.
Because we do it. We think they should do it. They should know.
It's a good idea. This is, and obviously they do, because they're taking care of themselves. Like, well, no. Right. So going back to refresh this, I think absolutely. I'm reminded of one client I had for 16 years, 2 or 3 times a week, depending. And, at some point, we'd always worked on lumbar-pelvic stability for years because he had low back issues and hip issues and other kinds of things. And then he moved past that and working on shoulders and some other stuff for a bit. And then he came back in and his hip was hurting. And I said, well, have you done any of your stability work? And he's like, what's that? Right. And I mean, we spent 3 years, probably 2 or 3 times a week doing stability work. And I told him it was stability work. But, that doesn't mean that just because he did have that in his repertoire, doesn't mean it's there now. And so we had to refresh again, go back to the beginning. Let's just talk through what we're doing. Let's give you some of the basic homework that we did, 12 years ago. And we're just going to go back to that because it's still, that issue pops back up again, which it sometimes does. And you take care of it the same way you did 12 years ago. Hopefully you've got a little better body awareness, but still got to do
let's hope.
So maybe not, but
something that I have said many, many times when a client says, well, how long do I have to do this for? I say, or when can I stop doing this? I say, whenever you want the pain to come back. Well, for some of the basics, it's like that. They still need the basics and they need to be reminded. And we do sometimes assume that they're doing that on their own. And I tell them, look, if you do it on your own, we can have fun here in this, studio. But sometimes it's good to remind them, hey, make sure you're doing your foam rolling if that's what you need. Make sure you're still doing your, whatever their thing is or whatever their needs are. Make sure that you hold them accountable because they absolutely will need that.
And that's something too that just because we're talking about being moderate and coming back and all that stuff, I think that's one of the roles that we can really play is that accountability piece. Again, just checking back in, like, have you been doing your calf stretches or have you been rolling or have you been whatever it is that, works for them? Because usually the response, if I haven't talked about it for a while, the response will typically be, what was that? What was I supposed to be doing? Or no, I haven't been, right? Those are the typical responses. And it's also why when I give homework, I try to give 3 things and I try to check in every time, and those 3 things may change. Those 3 to 5 things may change, but every time, hey, did you do your home program? How's that going? Just ask. And they give you the guilty look. That's fine. Like just put them back on track gently. But again, if you're looking at somebody who's trying to get back into a much higher level of activity, they may need to go back to those basics and remember the things that really worked for them last March when they were getting into something and they haven't done those things because they didn't need to for the last 8 months, right?
Well, speaking of which, let's talk about specific things that I'm going to call the general ideas that we can focus in on for just about every activity. Okay, what's a few things that we can give to almost every single client to prepare them at this point? Because yes, there are going to be specific things for their activity, but there are certain things that they probably have not been doing that we will want to give them as homework or put into their programming. For instance, one thing I'm thinking of is let's add some more rotation. Let's work on rotation.
The first thing that came to my mind was rotation. And I just do standing, wide leg, bent knee rotation. Just a nice, easy kind of flop, nothing fancy. I don't form it. And I'll have them work up to that. So I'll say, start with 20 reps each side, right? So they're going to do like basically count to 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And have the arms flop and have the head move. And a lot of times that alone, I find will just loosen things up and get lubrication going in the spine and the hips and the knees and everything else. So definitely rotation. I'm absolutely with you on rotation. If they are a golfer or a tennis player or an upper body person, thrower, pitcher, whatever, I'll absolutely have them do just like arm swings forward and back, arm swings up, arm swings to the side, and then some like rolling forward and back with a rotator cuff, moving the shoulder girdle, moving the arms. So I think we're thinking about mobility, right, for both those circumstances.
Yes.
And the other thing, and this is because this is my weak spot, is if they're doing something that requires some cardio and they really haven't been doing that, doing something to get their cardio up again, right? Yes. Whatever that is, walking, running, cycling, whatever suits them. But that'll often really take a dive if, let's say, somebody's just doing weight training for 4 or 6 months.
That
cardio will not stay going, will not stay happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And think of it just on a cellular level too. When you're not doing cardiovascular work, your muscle cells are going to lack the mitochondria that they
Hmm.
would have if you're doing more. If you're doing more cardiovascular training, you build up more mitochondria within the cell that lends itself to better oxygen utilization. Your cells become much more efficient. So they're going to recover faster. They're going to build strength faster.
Yep.
So, and I remind clients of this because nobody wants to warm up when they come in, but that might be the only cardio that they do per week for some people. So it's
Right.
like, look, I
Exactly.
need you to do something
Yep.
because it's going to help in the long run. It's going to make my job easier and it's going to make you much, much more likely for success down the road.
It'll help everything. I mean,
Yep.
especially if they really haven't done cardio for 4 or 5 or 6 months. Even if they're young, it's still like, you just got to get that back going. Because I don't know about you, but the first time you challenge your cardio, if you haven't been doing it for a while,
Yeah.
you think you're going to die. Like,
Yep. Yep.
it's dramatically bad. And you may, depending on your age and your general fitness level, you may recover pretty quickly. Your wind may come back, you may be able to recover quickly, or recover your fitness level quickly, but you've got to do the work. You just got to do the work, and it'll make a big difference in just feeling better generally.
Absolutely. Another thing that I'm thinking of for most of my tennis players as well as my golfers is I want to get them to move laterally. I
Yeah.
want them to
Hmm.
do side stepping or side shuffling. And people sometimes say, well, why for golfers? Well, think about the lateral hip. Their gluteus medius is you use so much in golf, and that's what's really working when you do all that lateral movement. So even just doing skaters, standing on one foot, then shifting over, standing on the other foot, standing, going side to side, something like that can really be beneficial for
Hmm.
my golfers. And when you talk about tennis and pickleball and baseball players, softball players, they need to move laterally. And it's something we just don't do on a regular basis, but we need
No,
it.
we don't, and absolutely we don't, and we do. Right. So lateral moves, stepping side, and I have them just standing up and just stepping
Oh,
side,
yeah.
or kind of doing a little bit of like a side shuffle.
Yep.
I mean, simple stuff. I may add
Yep.
resistance, I may add some more fun to it, but a lot of times it's just move sideways because
Yep.
again, if you've been doing very sagittal things, like you've been doing the treadmill or you've been doing the bicycling, right? You don't have that lateral strength. You just don't. Like, you haven't been working it. So that rotation, moving and warming up the shoulders, working on cardio if you need to. Those are some
Hmm.
key things that I think, 9 times out of 10, that's what I'm going to be working on with my clients when I'm trying to get them back to their activity level.
If anybody's ever been to a baseball game early, and I'm talking during like batting
Yeah.
practice,
Yep. Yep.
what do you see the outfielders doing? They are jogging with high knees.
Yep.
They are running. They are doing side shuffles. They are
Yep.
doing
Yep.
grapevines, which was the next thing I was going to say. Grapevines are one of the best things, karaoke, whatever you want to call them, where you're
Yep.
stepping in front of one leg. And I'll demonstrate this in the video version, stepping in front and then stepping behind, stepping in front, stepping behind, working sideways. You're getting a ton of rotation in the hips and through the spine. I mean, it's just a great move. And you can do that on the tennis court. You can do that, before you play golf. You can do that anytime, but it's a great prep. And, if someone says, well, I don't want to look foolish. Do you think that all these baseball players making all this money in the outfield are doing this? They do not care. They want to prevent their body from injury. They want to warm up and they want their body to perform at its highest level. And so do you. So those are some moves that I would add into, my athletes or weekend warriors or whatever you want to call them, and try and get them to move in those directions. And a lot of it is mobility. You said it perfectly. It's getting your body to just move better, get a little larger range of motion. Don't push it. If your body says, oh, wait, hold on a second, listen to your body. Don't push, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So there's some practical tips, there's some philosophical tips. There's some warnings, some red flags, just things to be aware of. Again, a lot of it
Exactly.
is just if you're about to increase your activity level a lot and doing something you haven't done before, if you care, or if you're a trainer or whether you're a client, think about it for a minute, right? What do I need to do to be able to do this successfully? Maybe I need to stretch a bit. Maybe I need to get a little cardio in. Maybe I need to do some lifting of something, right? Just start doing that, right? And then take breaks. When you really start in a new activity that you haven't done in a while, take those breaks and make sure that you're not going to do one obsessive activity for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, because we can all do that. Or I know I can. I'm sure many of you can as well.
One other thing I want to add in here, and it has nothing to do with movement, but I think it's important, is to remember to hydrate.
Yes.
Because as it starts to get warmer, we're not used to moving as much in the winter. We probably haven't sweat as much. You may be outside working in the garden. You may be, playing your sport. If you're not used to being hydrated, if you're not used to drinking enough and you are starting to sweat, that can become an issue. So I want to say, please, before you go out there, hydrate, stay hydrated during the activity. It's going to help.
One of the things I was noticed this time of year was clients would start to get foot cramps a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So it's just one of those things where, like, why is everybody getting foot cramps as soon as the weather got warmer? And in California, the weather can get a lot warmer. Plus, people are wearing sandals and things. But I think a lot of it was just that the weather got warmer and they didn't change their hydration regimen, because you just need a lot more liquid when it's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good tools that we, suggested today. But a lot of it comes down to, let's move more. Let's get our clients to move better.
And move sensibly.
Move sensibly. Use common sense. If your body's talking to you, take some time, either whether it be that 5 minutes or the rest of the afternoon, or even if it's like, you know what, not today. That's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly.
Listen to your body and just say, all right, not today. I'll try again tomorrow. And that's okay. Nothing's wrong with that.
No.
And check out the video version. I'm going to cover a lot of the exercises that we just talked about, just so you can see them in action in case you're wondering what we're talking about. So that will hopefully post the day after this one does.
All right, guys. So Brian, what do we need to tell people now?
About?
So how do they get in touch with us? Please subscribe, push the button, all those things.
All those things? Okay. You want me to tell all those things? All right.
All those things.
So if you do want to get in touch with us, go to movingconvos@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with us. I know we're old school. That's probably the easiest way. We do direct message. So we check that as well on Instagram @movingconvos is how to reach us there, as well as our personal Instagram things. But in general, email us if you have any questions. If you want us to cover a specific topic, hit us up. We'd love to answer any questions that you have or do a topic. We have a couple in the hopper that people have suggested that it's like, ooh, yeah, let's do that one. That's a good one. And there's one that's like, ooh, that's a tough one. Okay, yeah, we'll cover that, but that's going to be a little toughy. And that's great. It's going to push us a little bit. So those are ways to get in touch with us. Do me a favor. If you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, now that we are on Spotify, and hit the like, hit the subscribe so that it's going to be in your inbox every Tuesday morning. And, for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.